Brian Manning will be our speaker Sunday morning. There'll be boxes in the foyer of the auditorium for Nicaragua Christian School Christmas operation. If you're willing to host beyond these walls, see Brad Dye. Keep in your prayers Chad and Emily Blassingham and their children. They got plenty of health issues going on with them. Leon White has fallen and can't get up. Broke his collarbone. Remember Brother Leon. Tyler Brown, David Stoffel's son-in-law, has COVID and is very sick, pneumonia. Also remember Debbie Walker, Sophie McCafferty in your prayers. They've been diagnosed with COVID. And I have spread out closer to the front so y'all can spread out if you want to get away from your buddy who's, or may not be. Your fall youth retreat will be this Saturday, 8 a.m. at this building. If you'd be willing to host a Bacon Bible study, let Cody or China know. Starting September 7th through October 25th. Okay, has everybody got a sheet? Sean asked me to get you a sheet that has every chapter and all the references to the Old Testament. Those are the majority of them. I can't say that it is a conclusive list. Okay, so let's see. Last week we concluded section 1 of Revelation on emperor worship, reasoning in Revelation, which dove into the background of the book and talked about what it was like to live, Christians living among people who were commanded to worship the emperor, and why the book of Revelation had to be written. So instead of me going over a lot of the things that we've been reviewing, get out your sheet, top corner. Got a pen, pencil. Here's your test. Turn these in, write your name on them. Nah, you don't have to turn them in. Who wrote the book of Revelation? Not everybody at once. John. When did the author write the book? Approximately 95 AD is what scholars say. Late first century, in the 90s, all those are acceptable. Who was the book written to? I've only got one ear. 7 churches of Asia Minor, correct. What are the 3 suppositions found in the first 3 verses of Revelation? Happen soon. It was understandable and written to the original audience, which was the 7 churches. Okay, we'll go with that. What city had the first provincial temple? Pergamum. Who was the first emperor to have a temple dedicated to himself? Augustus. Where was the second temple built? Smyrna. Right up the road here in Smyrna. To whom was the second temple dedicated? Augustus was the emperor when Jesus was born. Who was the emperor when Jesus died? Tiberius, okay? Who was the emperor during Christ's ministry? That would be Tiberius also. What country is emperor worship most profitable? Asia Minor. What city was awarded the 3rd provincial temple? Ephesus. Name the emperor who burned Rome. Nero. Why was the book of Revelation written? Talk in my good ear. To warn the churches, encourage the churches, let them know what was about to take place. And who banished John to the island of Patmos? Which emperor banished John to the island of Patmos? Starts with a D. Yeah, Domitian. Okay. So he was banished. Domitian, we know, reigned from about 81 to 96. So we know that John was on that island during that time, wrote the book, sent it across the water, which was about 50 miles over to Ephesus, if they sent it to them first. And Millard, am I plugged in right? Push that one button back there on that wall. Okay. Okay. Deciphering the code, section 2. Okay, we did those. And that's the first 3 verses. What must shortly come to pass. Keep those things in your heart so it's understandable. And he wrote this to the original audience. Understandable, original audience, and sing. Here we go. All right. Ended up with emperor worship because those that would not worship the image of the beast would be killed. And that's why he wrote this. This is what you feared if you lived in the 1st century in Asia Minor. If you lived in Jerusalem, it wasn't that bad. They didn't go into emperor worship and take it that seriously there. But in Asia Minor, about 1,000 miles north of Jerusalem, Greece, Asia Minor, Rome, you could be killed if you did not worship the beast. Okay, so John's got to warn his servants, fellow Christians, about the impending dangers. John's got to encourage his fellow servants to remain faithful and strong. He's got to tell them who is coming for them and what to do about it. And John's got to encourage them because for 3.5 years, God will not intervene with evil, with Satan. So how's John going to do it? He's going to get the word out, and he's going to have to write it in such a way that the Romans don't kill him for writing it, so they can't understand it, okay? So he's obviously got to write it in a code, and that's what we have in the book of Revelation. Something that will allow the 7 churches to get it while confusing the Romans. And that's the code we call Revelation. He's got to do it in such a way as to not draw more attention to those in those certain cities that are being persecuted heavily, and not cause more persecution on those that aren't being persecuted very much. And he's writing to those people like in Philadelphia and Thyatira who aren't being persecuted yet. Okay, what would the church have that the Romans wouldn't understand, but Christians would? They would have the Old Testament. 404 verses in the book of Revelation, 500 allusions to the Old Testament. And that's what this sheet that I gave you tonight is. Like, if you look down there on Revelation 1:1, it kind of goes back and phrases from 1:1 come from Daniel 2:28 and 29. And we talked about that's where King Nebuchadnezzar had that dream of the statue, and you come up with the 4 different countries that are going to rule the universe. Head of gold, Romans; breast of silver, Medo-Persians; loins of bronze, Alexander the Great in Greece; and iron legs is Rome. Okay. But how do you let the church in on the secret without tipping off the Romans? You got to follow the code. The average Roman soldier has never heard of Isaiah, has no clue who Abraham was, or anything about the coming of the Messiah, or who he might know the name Jesus, because Jesus was crucified on a cross, and there had been lots of things that have happened since the year approximately 33, and Revelation here is written in the 90s. So what if the Jews tell on the Christians what the book of Revelation means? Well, they're not going to tell because The Old Testament's their book. It's their scrolls that they don't want confiscated, burned, thrown away. They want to keep them. Christians are going to use them and because they are Jews also, and they know the law. And just where John starts off in chapter 1, verse 13 there, he makes, let's call it a blunder, when he writes in verse 13, and among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe, reaching down to his feet with a golden sash around his chest. John drops a big clue here. And this is how the code's going to work through the whole book. Where to go to find his real message and how to use it to defeat evil that they are facing. Okay? These Christians probably have copies of the Gospels by this time. The Gospels probably have been written at least 40 years, 30 or 40 years, and they've probably read John's writings or John's Gospel, Matthew's Gospel, Luke, Mark, maybe some of Paul's letters they have read also. And they know that in the Gospels, Jesus refers to himself, and these writers refer to him as the Son of Man. But John writes it, a Son of Man. If you look in your Bible, if you've got a King James Version, your King James Version probably says the. Let me keep going. I'll get down to that in a second. Okay. In case you miss it in chapter 1, verse 13, if you look in Revelation 14:14, he says, he repeats, a Son of Man again. I looked, and there before me was a white cloud. Seated on the cloud was one like a Son of Man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Okay, the problem with churches from the, let's say since the 1600s, we've had the King James Version. And whoever made the King James Version thought they were doing John a favor in Revelation. He said, well, John used the Son of Man everywhere else. I bet he meant the in Revelation, but he didn't. He meant a. King James Version was commissioned in 1604, finished 7 years later in 1611. The version was approved by the King's Council of the Church of England. They knew of John's writings of the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and his use of the term the Son of Man. Okay. All your modern versions, English Standard, NIV, Revised Standard, just about anything from the 70s on will say a Son of Man because that's the article in the Greek language. Okay. They did what John said not to do. They added to the Word of God. No Greek text has the in it in those two verses. Okay. The Son of Man is used 83 times in the Gospels, and it's Jesus' favorite description of himself. It's used 12 times in the Gospel of John. So the church would be used to hearing about the Son of Man. Get all this stuff in here. Okay, so here's your little test. If you are sitting in church reading scrolls and you come across this verse, fill in the blank here. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his? What? That's wrong. See, and this is the principle John utilizes, okay? In Luke 9:25, it says very self. It doesn't say own soul. Matthew, let's see. If you're reading along, sitting there in a group, the book of Revelation, you just got this book of Revelation from John, and you're wanting to read about it, and you come across and you realize it's not what you thought it meant, okay? And you say, very self? No, that's wrong. It's own soul. Well, that's the kind of thing he's doing. And Dr. Morgan called this a whiplash verse. You read it and then you realize a little bit later that, that ain't what that says. Very self is what it says in Matthew 16:26. You expect one thing, John gives you something else totally to make you stop and think. He catches your attention in the book of Revelation. A Son of Man only occurs in Revelation, and in the Old Testament it occurs only in one place. And that's in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 13. Daniel 7:13 is like the Cliff Notes of Revelation, the summary or the synopsis of the book of Revelation. It's on the other one other place, Daniel 17:13 becomes the Cliff Notes, the book of Revelation. There we go. Because Daniel 7 predicts the fall of the Roman Empire. Okay, and if you're sitting in Asia Minor, in Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Philadelphia, Sardis, or Laodicea, and you read a letter that takes you all the way back to Daniel, and it predicts the fall of the Roman Empire, that would be good news to you. They know that Daniel 7 is probably the skeleton of the book of Revelation then. And if we go through Daniel 7, just about every verse of Daniel chapter 7 is used in the book of Revelation. Daniel 7:13. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. And in Revelation 14:14, I looked, and there before me was a white cloud. Seated on the cloud was one like a Son of Man. And if you'd been studying your scrolls that day and happened upon Daniel 7, you'd say, hey, Revelation here is using the same words in Daniel 7. Let's go back and look at that scroll and see what it has to say for us. Same thing in Revelation 13:1. And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns. Daniel 7:7. After that I looked in my vision at night. I looked, and there before me was a fourth beast. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. 13:1. I saw a beast coming out of the sea, and he had 10 horns. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. Revelation 13:5. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise authority for 42 months. He will speak against the Most High. In Daniel 7:25, he will speak against the Most High, talking about the beast, and oppress the saints and try to change the set times and laws. The saints will be handed over him for a time, times, and half a time. Okay, so here's where we got to do a little figuring and a little reasoning. A year, 2 years and half a year, or 3.5 years, which multiply times 12 equals 42 months. Okay, you're going to find in Daniel and Revelation, we're going to have 3 different ways of coming up with 3.5 years. 42 months times time and half a time, and 1,260 days. We're going to go across all 3 of those numbers, and they all add up to the same amount of time. Here's another one. Revelation 5:11. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. Then in Daniel 7, verse 10, a river of fire was flowing, coming out from before them. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Revelation 13:7. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. Daniel 7:21. As I watched, his horn was waging war against the saints and defeating them. Revelation 13:2. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like a lion. 4 great beasts. Daniel 7, verse 4. The first was like a lion. There before me was a second beast, which was like a bear. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. Almost every verse in Daniel 7 is in Revelation, the book of Revelation. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. Daniel 7:14. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Getting close to the end of the book, Revelation chapter 22, there will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever. Daniel 7:27 repeats it. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be handed over to the saints, the people of the Most High. So, I guess let's take a look at Daniel 7. Well, opened right up at it and looking back at it. Daniel 7 talks about the beast, and then down about 15, it's going to interpret everything that we've just read about in the first couple of verses here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Remember, we talked about Belshazzar when we did like the first or second week. He was a great-grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind, and he was lying on his bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were four winds of heaven, churning up the great sea. Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. And there before me was a second beast." Okay, the eagle, if you look on stones, steels, things where they've written the Babylonian language, the symbol for the Babylonian Empire was like a lion with wings of an eagle and the face with the face of a lion. Okay, so that one's gone. Let's see. Verse 5, "And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told to get up and eat your fill of flesh." And has 2 sides on this bear. The second kingdom that came into power in the universe was the Medo-Persians. Cyrus the Mede, Darius the Persian. And the Persians had the larger area, like Iran. And Cyrus the Mede, the Medes had more, a smaller area like Iraq. And it says that's why the 2 different sides. One's bigger than the other in its mouth. Verse 6, "After that I looked, and before me there was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule." And that's Alexander the Great, and his kingdom was divided amongst his 4 generals once he died. And the leopard was his emblem on his shields, coats of armor. Verse 7, "After that in my vision, at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth." And iron should just give it away to us right there. The statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the iron legs represented the Roman Empire. And this 4th beast in Daniel's dream has, it had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims. It trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little horn, which came up amongst them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. All right, do you remember when I had Eddie stand up over here and act like the image that was in this temple that they were worshiping? The second beast commanded the first beast to breathe and to, what else did I tell you to do? I know you breathe. I know you told on people. You're not a Roman. You're a Christian, aren't you? He spoke boastfully, and those are back in Revelation chapter 13. Verse 9, as I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Who's the Ancient of Days? God, yeah. His clothing was white as snow. His hair on his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. Wonder what kind of wheels God rode around in. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated. The books were opened. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words. The horn kept speaking. And we know, identify this horn as Domitian, which could also be interpreted as Nero. We know that in Revelation 13, we said the first beast that come up out of the sea was Nero. The second beast that come up out of the sea was Domitian, who gave power to the first beast. Okay, so this horn is Domitian here. Then I continued to, but now Daniel hasn't got a clue who he's writing about. He's just using a horn, which usually stands for power. Whenever you're out there bullfighting, Joey, you want to stay away from the horn end. You want to stay close to that rear end. You'd rather be kicked as gored, right? So we hadn't fought bulls in a long time, have we, Joey? Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and his body destroyed and thrown into a blazing fire. And then in Revelation talks about the beast being thrown into fire and brimstone. The other beast had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days, and he was led into his presence. Okay? And that's code for Jesus, a Son of Man, in the presence of God, the Ancient of Days. He was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshiped him, and not an emperor. Not an emperor is not in this book. I just threw that part in our council. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And that kingdom is the church and or heaven. When you read his kingdom will last forever, it means it will last forever on earth. If it says forever and ever, it will last for eternity in heaven. Verse 15, the interpretation of the dream from Daniel 7. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those who was standing there and asked him the true meaning of this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kingdoms that will rise from earth. Okay, and we know those 4 kingdoms to be Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Okay? Verse 17, the 4 great beasts are 4 kingdoms that will rise from the earth. But the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. So forever they're going to possess it on earth and forever and ever in heaven. Then I wanted to know the true meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the saints and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time came when they possessed the kingdom. When this 3.5 years is over, when this 42 months has expired, when this 1,260 days has ended, time, times, and half a time, the saints are going to repossess the kingdom. But during this time, God is going to let Satan have his way. Okay. Verse 23. He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from the kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and laws. The saints will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be handed over to the saints, the people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. And I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. And maybe that last little part meant more to them than the other parts. The code book is the Old Testament, but keep it to yourself. But I kept the matter to myself. Next week we'll analyze. Do I have any more slides? I think I do. Okay. It's almost impossible to overestimate the importance of Daniel 7. Okay. Let's quit right there for tonight. And next week we will analyze the emperors. We'll count down the 10. We'll talk about taking away the 8. We'll come up with who the beast is by Daniel's reckoning. Thank y'all for coming. And that, you can use that sheet here too if you want to, if you're reading ahead or looking ahead. Those are the references back to the Old Testament in those chapters. The bold letters or the verses, y'all can figure that part out, but there you are.